Hi, I'm John F. Allen.
And I'm R.J. Sullivan.
And we're the Two Towers.
Greetings and welcome to the Two Towers Talk Show. I'm your host, John F. Allen, Tower 1.
And I'm R.J. Sullivan, Tower 2.
Today, in honor of Black History Month, we are going to talk about some of the top Black films that we enjoy and have watched over the years, ones that are really poignant with us and have shaped us as viewers and creators as well. And just as a statement about Black films and Black history, Black films are only Black films because we as Black people have had to make a way within the mainstream and to see their voices realized. And now it's becoming more and more mainstream, which is a good thing, but it's still something that we have a little ways to go with. But there's a deep history for Black films, and we want to touch upon that and pay homage to that and explore that here with this episode. So that all being said, Black History Month, it's only 28 days of the month of February. So basically, when it comes down to it, this is to honor them, but these films are 365 days a year. Check them out. They're good films and great films and worthy of your attention all year round. So that all being said, let's get into it. We're going to start with RJ. He's going to discuss the first film in his list of films for this episode.
All right. Well, you put me on the spot here. I wonder how many people would consider this one a great film, but I do want to go back and say, to your point, we put this together pretty quick. I did not get a chance to really do as deep of a dive as I would have wanted, so I went with just my favorites. Just take that for what it's worth. Ones that I remember fondly, have seen many, many times, and can speak to exactly why I love them so much. Next year I'm looking forward to diving a little deeper and really getting into this topic a bit more. But I will do the best I can to represent, the films that have meant a lot to me through the years. And there we go. So what might be a surprising first choice for some people is I went with the movie Blackula, which, as the term is known now, was a 1972 American blaxploitation horror film. I say that because I'm fairly certain the term blaxploitation did not exist at the time that this set of these several movies were being made. I believe that's what they were called afterwards. But it was a time when Black filmmakers were making genre films for Black audiences, and they were breaking through in a really big way. For those who are not familiar with the movie, the title Blackula might actually cause you to cringe a bit, but I'm just going to say, as someone who is a huge horror fan who loves vampire movies, the movie Blackula is probably the best movie that could be made out of a movie called Blackula, meaning that it is a really, really solid vampire film. And I would compare it to the best of the Christopher Lees. I would compare it to the best of the Universals. I believe that it stands up as a really fine vampire movie, and also as its own specific thing. I believe it stands up quite well. So a little bit more about it. It was directed by William Crane, and it stars William Marshall in the title role, about an 18th century African prince named Mamuwalde, who's turned into a vampire and later locked in a coffin by Count Dracula in the Count's castle in Transylvania in the year 1780. After Dracula refuses to help I'm going to stumble over this name, Mamuwalde suppress the slave trade. So there's a little bit of they borrow quite a bit from Dark Shadows, between him being chained up in his coffin, and also there's a lot of playing around of the trope of the reincarnated princess, the lost love from a previous life, showing up in the modern world, and the vampire being very taken with that. We've seen that in Fright Night. It was played out in Dark Shadows. It even was in the Bram Stoker's Dracula that made by Francis Ford Coppola in the 90s, even though that was never a part of the novel. But I'm not going to go down that. But it's played very well here as well. Blackula was released to mixed reviews in the United States, but was one of the top grossing films of the year. It was the first film to receive an award for Best Horror Film at the Saturn Awards. Blackula was followed by the sequel Scream, Blackula Scream in 1973, which my recollection of that one is not quite as fond, and inspired a wave of blaxploitation themed horror films. William H. Marshall's Mama Walde was the first black vampire to appear in film. That surprised me when I read that. Blackula was in production between late January and late March of 1972. While Blackula was in its production stages, William Marshall worked with the film producers to make sure the character had some dignity. The music for Blackula is unlike that of most horror films. It uses rhythm and blues as opposed to the haunting classical music. The film's soundtrack features a score by Gene Page and contributions by the Hughes Corporation and 21st Century Limited. So I remember catching this a few times as a kid. It was probably one of those late night horror host things, and I've rewatched it several times. It pops up on Amazon Prime, and I'll watch it every couple of years. I just think it's just a very solid, well told vampire film, and I can really appreciate the fact that during the climax that the vampire is smacking around some of the police that are attacking him, and I noticed there were quite a few blue uniformed white police officers attacking him, and he was making them all thump one after another. And I could think about the civil rights setting at the time and the antagonism going on. And I'm not making a political statement, but I understand why it was in there. This dude is really cool. I mean, the performance is great. Everything plays off. If you're thinking about the tropes that could come about from a movie like this, but it's as well played as it possibly could, and I think it actually excels at what it tried to do, and that's why I think it's still fondly remembered, even much better than many of the vampire films that came before it and after it. So that is pick number one. I'm going with Blackula. John, what do you think?
Well, I have fond memories of this film growing up as a black kid in the 70s. So this was definitely up there with Shaft and Superfly and Friday Foster and all of the others,
Foxy Brown.
It was like that, I can dig it, solid, it was a time, you had to be there. Hard to explain, unless you just watch these things. And I recommend Blackula. Blackula Scream was not as good as the original. What made it the best for me was that Pam Grier was in it, she was
that would help a lot.
Yes. So, if you don't watch Blackula Scream for any other reason, Pam Grier's in it. That should all that needs to be said there. Just to give you a little background with regards to the lead actor who played Mama Walde is William Marshall. He was born in Gary, Indiana here.
I did not know that.
Yes. And he studied, he attended New York University as an art student, and he transferred to the Actors Studio to study theater. And he was in Broadway well before he started in these films, and it shows his presence in the film. I mean, this is a genre film, is a campy horror film, but he was a grade A actor throughout the film.
Absolutely.
So you had to put that into perspective. And like you said, he wanted to give dignity to the character. That has to do with his training. He made his Broadway debut in 1944 in Carmen Jones. And in 1950, he understudied with the late, great Boris Karloff as Captain Hook in a Broadway production of Peter Pan. So he's got other nerd cred besides this. And just a brilliant actor in and of himself. He had the gravitas to pull this role off, and he could make it dignified, even though it was campy as hell. So that being said, kudos to William Marshall with that regard. I like this film. I've watched it several times, and I own it. So there you go. So
my last comment on this is simply that, when you're looking at something like a Hammer horror or Universal horror, you kind of have to meet it halfway. I mean, nothing's going to play like a modern movie. You have to approach all of this with a certain thought to the time. But I think if you are not familiar with Blackula and you're kind of scoffing at the idea of it, I think people will be surprised that you don't have to give it any more consideration than you do any other really good horror film from that era. In fact, I think it holds up better than most. So
I would agree. And I definitely will say, as far as blaxploitation horror movies go, it holds up the best of any of them, because Black Frankenstein and Black Werewolf were horrible.
I've not experienced either of those, so I'll keep that in mind.
If you want to just laugh and just shake your head and then face palm throughout the entire film while you're eating your popcorn, then those are the movies that you should do it with, because that's what it will entail. So, first film on my list is Imitation of Life, and I'm just going to put this out there for all of our viewers. If you've not seen Imitation of Life, and that's the 1959 version, because there was a 1934 version, the 1959 version is the best, in my opinion. It was the one I saw first, and it was the one that's most endearing to me. This movie came out in 1959. It was directed by Douglas Sirk. It was produced by Ross Hunter and released by Universal International. It was Sirk's final Hollywood film and dealt with issues of race, class, and gender, which are very much in the news and in what we're dealing with in modern times. So definitely, again, recommendation that you go back and watch this film. Imitation of Life, this particular one, is the second film adaptation of Fannie Hurst's 1933 novel of the same name. Read the novel. That in and of itself is going to give you a great foundation. I saw the 1934 film, which was directed by John M. Stahl. It doesn't have the same gripping acting. It doesn't have the same production value as the 1959 version, in my opinion. But I would recommend that you see both and you read the novel. That being said, the film's top billed stars are Lana Turner, which, that's enough reason to watch it. But outside of the story, so John Gavin, and the cast also includes Sandra Dee, she was up and coming at that. She was like 60 when this came out. Don O'Herlihy, Susan Conner, Robert Alda, and Juanita Moore. Conner and Moore received Academy Award nominations for their performances in this film. So this is to show you that there's a lot of production value going, into this film. This is not just a fly-by-night recommendation. This is a classic film, and I encourage all of our viewers and listeners to check it out if they haven't already. But one of the most important and one of the most, for me specifically, and I would dare say most well-remembered things about this film is that there is a solo in a church. And I'm not gonna spoil it. I mean, the movie is like 60 years old, but I'm not gonna spoil the plot of it or whatnot, or what happens. But basically, Mahalia Jackson, that's the first name in gospel. I mean, there will never be another. And there's some powerful gospel singers out there, but she's in a class all by herself. If you've never heard her sing, you should listen to her music. She sings a solo in this film. Every time I watch this film and they get to this point, I cry. And I'm man enough to tell you, it puts me in tears. It's so moving, so powerful. You can't help if you have a heart and you are looking, especially when you're watching all the other events that lead up to this solo, and you see it, and then you can put yourself in that position and have the empathy for the characters. You can't help it. You won't be able to help yourself but to weep. It is that deep. In 2015, the United States Library of Congress selected Imitation of Life for preservation in the National Film Registry, finding it culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. The original 1934 version of Imitation of Life was added to the National Film Registry in 2005. So that again goes to show you how important and the production value and merit of this film. That's why it's the top of my list. It's not a Black produced film, but it centers around a Black actress and her daughter who are living with Lana Turner's character, who is an aspiring actress, and the dynamics between them.
Okay. Yes, I am familiar with this movie. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought I was.
Lana Turner has a daughter the same age in this film. And so you've got two teenage girls, two different lifestyles. There's a lot going on with this film. But I cannot stress enough how much I recommend it.
Yeah, I need to go back and revisit it. It's been a long time for me. So, but yes, I do remember it is quite a moving movie. I remember the last few shots are quite something else. So yeah. My second movie was one where you kind of have to, I think you had to have been there in the 80s, John, I'm guessing. This was absolutely. This was Eddie Murphy at the height of his powers, and in the middle of his run when he could do whatever he wanted, and he did. And I believe that with the movie Coming to America, things came to a perfect point for him where he had a series of hits. He was one of the most popular entertainers and actors on the planet at that time, and he made a movie that I think where he absolutely topped himself, and at a time when he was just doing one hit after another and so many movies I love so much. I think Coming to America was where it hit the pinnacle, where it sort of exceeded itself. So, going through the basics, Coming to America is a 1988 American romantic comedy film directed by John Landis. I'll come back to that name in a minute. Based on a story originally created by Eddie Murphy, who also starred in the lead role. The film co-stars Arsenio Hall, James Earl Jones, yes, that James Earl Jones, Sherry Headley, and John Amos. The first installment in the Coming to America film series. That's a dubious comment because the second film is about to come out. It was released in the United States June 29th, 1988. Eddie Murphy plays Akeem Joffer. Joffer? It's Akeem. It's Akeem Joffer, I believe, the crown prince of the fictional African nation of Zamunda, who travels.
Zamunda.
Go for it, John.
Is Zamunda.
Zamunda. Thank you. Who travels to the United States in the hopes of finding a woman he can marry. So, the exciting thing, the reason I wanted to bring this up is that Coming to America, that's with a number 2 in the middle, will be on Amazon Prime in March, which I have to think means they'll probably put the original on Amazon Prime at the same time, because why wouldn't you? And this is absolutely one of my favorite Eddie Murphy films. I don't remember how many times I paid to see it in the theater. I thought it was absolutely fantastic from beginning to end. For a number of reasons. First of all, directed by John Landis. He's the guy who did probably for a lot of people, the Michael Jackson's Thriller video, along with American Werewolf in London, and pretty sure he did Blue.
Movie.
I'm sorry?
Kentucky Fried Movie.
Okay, that one I'm not as familiar with. I believe he also did. I just had it. American Werewolf in London. Blues Brothers, correct?
I believe so. We'll do a little further research on that.
Yeah, and then a vampire film in the 80s. Yeah. For those who are maybe younger and maybe think of Eddie Murphy as the voice of the donkey and the voice of the dragon, and maybe know the more family friendly Eddie Murphy. This is the cooler, raunchier, edgier Eddie Murphy, when he was really telling a lot of truths and really putting a lot of things out there, but yet in this movie he was doing a lot of really clever things. Arsenio Hall had a talk show for all too brief of a time. He was sort of the cooler, hipper late night show host there for a few years. Really missed him when he went off the air. I was sad to see him go, but this is when Arsenio Hall was I believe this kind of teed that up, if I'm not mistaken, but it allowed him to make his mark there for a while. There are several really terrific things in this movie, one of which is I'll just call it the barbershop scenes. And if you've not seen the film, watch for those. They pop up frequently throughout, and it's just a total delight from beginning to end. But for me, Eddie Murphy was a treasure, someone that we didn't realize how much of a treasure he was at the time. And I'm not saying that anything has happened to him, but he had an edge for a time that is no longer there, in part due to career choices and in part because he just had to change with the times. And he's still a wonderful comedian and a wonderful actor. But there was a time there in the 80s when what he was doing things that no one else was doing, and this is the pinnacle of that. So if you're not familiar with the movie, you'll get a chance to check it out again pretty soon and see its sequel. And I also want to do a couple shout outs to some other folks in there. John Amos, probably best known from the TV series Good Times, plays the fast food manager. It's absolutely hysterical. At the time this movie came out, I worked in a McDonald's, and I'm 100% sure they found an actual fast food restaurant to film in, because it looked so authentic.
McDowell's. That was the name of
they called it McDowell's. Yeah, it was they got the Big Mac, we got the Big Mick.
Right.
Our buns don't have sesame seeds. Anyway, I could go down this rabbit hole for too long. There's a short scene by someone who tries to rob the fast food restaurant. The actor, you may have heard of him. His name was Samuel Jackson. And another memorable moment was an actor by the name of Louis Anderson who was doing whatever it was Louis Anderson does. I never did quite figure him out, but he is unusually funny in this particular movie as one of Akeem's co-workers there at the fast food restaurant, and it's just so much fun. It's an actor, a black actor who had the power to make whatever he wanted, and he was not afraid to really do some interesting things, and that's why I hold this movie in such high esteem. John, do you have some thoughts?
Absolutely. This film was really also like a coming of age film, uh, particularly for Black folks, because I remember I was a teenager when this film came out, and I had followed Eddie Murphy's career since his days at SNL. And this film was like all the talk. And I do want to make some certain shout outs here to Madge Sinclair, who played a Queen Jafar, who was Akeem's mother. She was a Jamaican-born actress, a very lovely lady who was very talented. She unfortunately passed away. She was in Roots and Convoy, but here's another little pop-up fact. She was the mother of Simba in The Lion King.
That's right. I knew that.
Yes. And so to say that she got to work with James Earl Jones, who was Mufasa, as anyone who's not lived under a rock would know. Also, Frankie Faison, who's another talented comedian, was in this film. Vanessa Bell, who has found the Fountain of Youth. She is just gorgeous, and you know, she's been in so many things. Just check her out. Eric LaSalle had a very pivotal part or role in this film, and you may know him in ER, where he played Dr. Peter Benton, which was probably his most famous role, but he started out in this film prior to ER coming into existence. So there's a lot of little subtleties where Coming to America is concerned. And yes, I love this film. It's just, there's so many things that go on in this film. And it's a little bit of trivia here about this film. There's a point in this film where you have a tie-in to another Eddie Murphy film.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
So, you know, you have Eddie and he's going past this docks, and there's these two bums on the dock, and I think he throws them some money or something like that.
You remember correctly. Yep.
And it turns out that that's Ralph Bellamy and Don Amici, who played in the film Trading Places, which came out in '83, 5 years prior. So it's like a whole little shout out to a previous Eddie Murphy film, which I thought was very interesting.
A couple more things before we move on. Innocent Blood was the vampire film I was trying to recall that John Landis did. And also, have you seen the trailer to the sequel coming to America?
Yes, I have.
James Earl Jones looks great. I mean, you know, you would think like that he wouldn't still have his, you know, considering how old he must be by this time. He has held up so incredibly well. I'm looking forward to seeing him back on the big screen and seeing his presence, because in the trailer it was still so impressive to see that he still has it, and he can still play that role, and it looks like it's going to be hysterical. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, I tell Simba that it is to be youthful is to have a youthful heart.
Indeed.
So that's my little James Earl Jones impersonation.
Yeah.
It needs a little bit of work, but it's pretty good for someone who's not a professional.
No, but it's exciting to see that he's still able to present so well. I don't know how old he is, but
he's in his 80s.
Yeah,
yeah,
and he looks great.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Hats off to him.
Right, and just go through Eddie Murphy's whole filmography here, but I do want to make note that there are 2 movies that came out prior to the new forthcoming coming to America. That is Dolomite Is My Name and Mr. Church. And those were very dramatic films that Eddie Murphy starred in and had a hand in producing that I'm going to recommend here because he acted his ass off and he did a really good job. This is almost like a coming back for him in his older, as an older actor, as a more experienced actor. And I would dare say that, this is some of the best work he's had in probably 10 years, maybe 20, if you're going to push it. And that's saying something. He had some misses, but I think that, that's a perfect segue for me to lead into my film. That is Harlem Nights. Now, Harlem Nights came out it was released in 1989, the year after Coming to America. And it is an American crime comedy drama that was written and executive produced and directed by Eddie Murphy himself. Murphy co-stars with Richard Pryor, that's like a dream team right there, those 2. But wait, Johnny, there's more.
Especially at that time.
Right, exactly. But wait, Johnny, there's more. They are also joined by Red Fox. Now, this is like 3 generations of comedians that were the top of their game at some point in their career. So just to see that lineage right there, that in and of itself was worth it all. And then the film also stars Della Reese. And it also was the debut for Charlie Murphy, Eddie Murphy's brother, who unfortunately has passed away from cancer. Again, cancer's taken everybody. It's yeah. Anyway, this film was Eddie Murphy's only directorial effort. He had always wanted to direct and star in a period piece because this movie takes place in the late 1930s in Harlem, New York. And he also wanted to work with Pryor. Richard Pryor, seeing him when RJ and I were growing up in all sorts of films or whatnot, this was like a dream come true to me. That's why this film is my number 2 on this list, because it brought together everybody that I wanted to see. Arsenio Hall also is in this film in a bit part, which is really funny. So if you haven't seen Harlem Nights, go check it out. It's an excellent film, in my opinion. It's a lot better than it gets credit for being. It's got a lot of negative reviews because of the slow pacing, but to me, it was worth it all. It was back then when it came out, it was a financial success because it had a initial budget of 30 million, but grossed 95 million. And for a comedy, that's a lot of money. You have a comedy that's, making that much even today, you're pretty successful. So that being said, the box office receipts were there. Somebody liked this film. I'm one of them, and I would highly recommend anyone who hasn't seen it to go out and check it out.
Absolutely. Yeah, Eddie Murphy had that marquee name that, especially at that time, that people are going to go check. We're going to go check that out.
Well, this concludes part 1 of our 2-part series on Black History Month movie celebration. Join us Wednesday at noon for part 2 of this series. Thanks and stay nerdy.
The Two Towers Talk Show is sponsored in part by OG Nerds, a new social media community dedicated to nerds of a certain age, 40 and over, although all are welcome. Members are encouraged to share articles and links on their favorite nerdy topics such as animation, anime, art, books, writing, comics, manga, movies, music, sports, tech, science, TV, video games, RPGs, and more. Be sure to visit them on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
The Two Towers Talk Show is sponsored in part by Showtime Cinema in Mooresville, Indiana. Their friendly staff is always willing to go the extra mile to make your movie-going experience an enjoyable and memorable one. Enjoy the comfort of their new cushioned seating in their spacious auditoriums, and while you're there, be sure to stop by the concession stand and purchase some popcorn where real butter topping is an option. They're located at 300 South Bridge Street in Mooresville, Indiana. We hope to see you at the movies.